Greetings, listeners, and welcome to The Spiritual Experience, a show where we share stories of life, love, and redemption for all of humanity on Earth. So sit back and enjoy. Try to identify with the speakers and not compare. Don't forget to subscribe on all podcast platforms. I'm your host, Jay Lewis, and here we go. Hey, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are, however you are, whomever you are. Welcome back, Spiritual Experience. It's been a couple of days. I hope you guys are doing okay. It's getting a little hairy out there. You know, the temperature's changing, the climate's changing, but we're still rocking and rolling. Today we have a super special guest, a guy that I've known for a long time. And he's got an incredible story. It's going to help all of you guys out, whether you want it or not. So say hello to my brother, Anthoneech. What's up? All right. So, Ant, where are you from?
I'm from downtown Brooklyn, Red Hook, what we called South Brooklyn, growing up. My parents were born and raised down there. My grandparents were also born and raised down there. So
you're like third generation in that neighborhood?
Yeah, except my father's father. He came from Italy. From in that neighborhood growing up, I had like family everywhere on every single block. No matter where I turned, where I looked, they were there.
What was it like for you with all your cousins around and everything?
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. You came out of your house. There was always somebody around. It was just a lot of fun just seeing people on a daily basis.
Did you go to school with all your family members too? What was that like?
Just one. Just one. My cousin Teresa.
Yeah.
Yeah, we went to school together.
Nice. So, and this is in the 80s, right? What was the neighborhood like?
Yeah, 80s, I was in elementary school, and then high school, I started at like 90, 91 to 95.
Yeah, that's when Brooklyn was Brooklyn.
Yeah, real Brooklyn.
Yeah. Now it's like, it's whatever. But listen, hey, you can still, you get caught on the wrong corner, even now, at 2 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon. But, everyone keeps saying that, New York's going backwards, but it'll never be like it was.
No, I don't think it'll ever be like it was, and people don't realize there's a whole Brooklyn is huge, and not everything is gentrified.
Right, absolutely. Now, when did you get introduced to drugs and alcohol? How did that become part of your life?
So I think I first remember like my father. I always knew he was doing something wrong. When you're a little kid and, the adults are partying, they're drinking, they're sniffing coke, whatever, smoking weed. You don't know what it is yet. You're too young, but you know something is wrong. And I remember not liking any of their friends. I hated them.
Really?
I was a little kid, yeah. Like 5 years old, I would say.
Oh, and you could tell right away, like, this person's a pain in the ass.
5, 6, 7 years old, yeah. And I just remember having anger against these people, not liking them.
Not even like anxiety. You were angry.
Yeah. I didn't want them there. I wanted them to leave.
Wow. But that's like, is that your other family members or just your parents' friends? Like, is there a difference between the two?
Yeah, because my father, would have his friends over. My father used to like smoke weed with his niece, my cousin Lucille. That was really the only one, and like one other nephew. And unfortunately, she turned into a crackhead and passed away.
Right.
And same thing with my other cousin.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So then his friends would come over. You're like, I don't like these people. I don't even want to be,
Yeah.
So how did it go from that to like one day be like, hey, maybe I can start dabbling, or what's the story?
Well, I remember going downstairs in the basement, and I remember my father had like a mountain of cocaine on the table, and he was
nice, like Scarface style.
Yeah, and he was cutting it up and bagging it, and I remember asking him, I was like, Dad, what is that? And he's like, oh, it's my medicine. And I just was like, okay, and I knew he was lying to me, but I didn't know what it was, you know. You know, and then always my father like always smoked weed in the house. There was always, I would always find his weed stash like at a young age, and I don't know. I when I first remember hanging out with a group of kids who smoked weed and drank every day, I definitely remember me saying, "This is not what I want to do." You know, I don't want to drink. I don't want to smoke weed. And for like a whole year, I hung out with these people, and and I refused to drink. I didn't want to.
These are just kids like in the neighborhood or kids from school?
Neighborhood kids.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Now, did you, when you saw what they were doing, like, oh shit, that's what my dad is fucking getting down with? Did you make the connection, or you were just like...
Well, when we started smoking weed, what I used to do is rob my father's stash and then sneak out of the house at night when my parents went to sleep, and then meet, you know, my friends and smoke my father's weed, because we would, you know, he had the good stuff, you know, so, but, yeah, like I didn't, you know, I was a smart kid. I was a smart kid. I was like a nerd, you know, and I wanted really nothing to do with that, but I kind of couldn't escape it. Like if I came out of my house, you know, there was mobs of kids just back then hanging out on Henry and Sackett and President Street and all down there.
Right. So, yeah, it was just, it was a different time. Like, you didn't have to go searching. It was right there. And at that time, you know, I talk about this on some of the other episodes, even with some of the younger people who come on here. Like, you know, we're the same age in our 40s. But in our day, there was obviously no internet or anything else. So you only knew your whole neighborhood.
Right.
And unless you left your neighborhood, you didn't know anything else.
Right.
So that was it.
Right.
You know?
I never like called my friends or anything like that, because I would come outside and they would just be there.
Right.
And yeah, I didn't venture out of the neighborhood. There really was no reason for me to.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. So, how old were you when you started stealing your dad's weed and doing the other stuff?
I had to be about 13 when I started taking his weed. Yeah, and it was like he would, you know, discover that I took it from him, and he would be like, you know, we're not partners. You understand that, right? And at first, you know, I didn't know what he was talking about, and I was like, he's talking about the weed that I took last night.
Right.
You know?
That's funny.
But that's it. He never, and nothing else was ever done about it.
Yeah, I think also, yeah, that's a strange thing when you have parents that are like that. You know, when I remember, you know, my dad was so strict and so bizarre and so erratic in a lot of ways, but then, you know, I was like, I don't know how old I was, 17 or something. And he found like 1.5 grams of cocaine in my pocket of my shirt. And he just called me downstairs. He showed it to me. And his thing was, if your mother sees this, we're never going to fucking hear the end of it. And I had the balls. I was so divorced from reality. I was like, can I have it back? And he was like, no.
Yeah.
And then that was it. And we never spoke about it again. So crazy.
Absolutely crazy. Because if I fast forward a couple of years and, you know, now I'm doing like harder stuff and pills and coke. Eventually I started doing heroin. I remember my mother saying, why don't you just ask your father for weed instead of stealing it from him? He'll give it to you. Wow. I was like, really? She's like, yeah. So I asked him, and he started to give it to me. So
when did you graduate a little bit at a time to all the other drugs and stuff?
It just was like, you know...
Progression?
Total progression. Yeah, total. You know, it was the drinking and the weed and, like, coke and pills and acid. There was a point when I was tripping on acid, like, every single weekend.
No way.
Every single weekend. The Eli, 5th and President.
What was that like?
Top floor had them.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I love tripping on acid. You know, when you're, you could only do it when you're like a teenager, because I think I would lose my mind.
I would jump out this window right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. I used to do the same thing. I had, you know, my sister had like red shag carpet in her room, and I would take these orange sunshines, and I would take like 2 of them. And I start tripping, and then I would like swim through the shag rug. And when you're in like 8th grade, it's, you know, it's a good idea, it's a good time, but, you know, eventually, you know, it's not enough, and you got to start doing other stuff.
Look, I never, in a million years, would have ever thought that, you know, what I was doing would lead to, you know, a lifelong battle with addiction. You know, at the time, you know, that was the farthest thing from my mind. It was like, yeah, I'm just having fun with my friends. You know, eventually I'll leave them and go to school somewhere and start my life.
Right. Now, were you still doing good in school, or were you starting to have trouble with the law? Like, where does your, you know, it's just like it starts, you know, you start dabbling a little bit, then all of a sudden it becomes like a lifestyle. There's like a bridge you cross where you're like, no, this is my life now, and I'm not just fucking around.
Yeah, it was the summer between junior and senior in high school.
Yeah, so you're like 16, 17 or so, yeah?
Yeah, and that's when I first started doing heroin. So I was a straight A student, and
This whole time, up until then?
My entire life, I was a straight A student, always. And then senior year in Bishop Ford, I failed like every class.
Out of nowhere?
Every class.
Seemingly, like out of nowhere?
Yeah. I didn't care if I failed. I didn't apply for any colleges. Now I'm talking about I really wanted to go away to school. Like, that was my thing. I just didn't care about anything.
Right. So
really fast, I didn't care about anything.
Was it so when you got introduced to heroin, how did that change for you?
You know, at first it's not really a problem. At first it's like, you know, you're doing it here. You know, you're doing it as a calm down. You know, we're sniffing coke all night, and you know, I'm not crashing.
Right.
You know, these kids are sleeping right now, and we just stopped sniffing coke. What are they doing? And you know, I found out, and I said, all right, give me some, and that's what it kind of was at first. You know, it wasn't really a problem. It wasn't a daily thing, but you know, and again, my friends were doing it. I didn't want to do it. I held out, but you know, if you're hanging out with a bunch of people that are doing it, eventually you are too. You know.
Yeah, I think I had this also realization because I had one of my best friends on earth. Everybody's my best friend, you all know. But my cousin, right? He used to look at me. He used to be like, you know, bro. He's like, dude, you got to have like a strong mind. You know, That's what he would say and this is when I was in my addiction, and I would have like little moments of clarity with him. And he'd like, bro, you just gotta have a strong mind, man. It's okay. You can do it. Like, you can't be so crazy. But I knew inside my heart of hearts that, dude, I didn't have it. You know, I didn't have it. Like, eventually, like, maybe you're a little bit different in this sense. Like, first you say no, and then like a little bit you get worn down. Mm-hmm. Like, when I gave up, I just gave in. Yeah. And I was like, all right, then I guess this is what we're doing. Right. You know?
Well, at first I you know, it wasn't like no holds barred, like screw everything. I tried to control it. I tried to, you know, still do what I had to do. And I remember the first day where I realized that I was addicted to heroin. My father was driving me to college, to school. I got into City Tech.
Where's that?
Right here on J Street and Tillery.
What were you going to study?
At the time, I think I was going for architecture.
Nice.
Yeah. And
so you made it out of Bishop Ford, even with those failing grades or whatever?
Yeah, I made it out. I had to go to summer school. Like, whatever I had to do to just get out of there.
Fucking
and I did.
Torture.
Yeah, it was terrible. Yeah, and he was driving me, and we were going down J Street, and I was like, I feel weird this morning. Like, something's not right. I feel sick. You know, I remember being like cold and having the chills. And then I remember when it just like, I put two and two together, and I was like, oh my God, I think I'm dope sick. You
right.
know?
Did you know anything about that before that day? Or did you feel any of that before?
You know, I mean, I have a lot of drug addicts in my family.
Right. Move the mic a little bit closer. Sorry, but it's okay. There you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
It runs like really rampant. You know, so my mother would, you know, she would tell me like, oh, you should have known better.
Right.
You know.
Why? Because of what you saw?
Yeah. You know, my uncles and my cousins were really bad heroin addicts. But I didn't know. Like, I don't know. Maybe I was young. Maybe I just didn't think about it. I really don't know what exactly it was, but no, I didn't. And I didn't think it was going to turn into the monster that it did. At
this time, are you like shooting heroin, or are you just sniffing heroin?
I'm sniffing it.
Yeah. How much were you doing?
First, you're doing like a half a bag, a quarter bag, you know, and then it just progresses, you know, to however much I could buy.
Right. Like when I started doing dope, one bag would last me 3 days.
Yeah.
On one bag with little pen caps, poof, poof, one-on-ones. And then within maybe a month, it was like a bag a day. And then within 3 months, I was sniffing half a bundle a day.
Sure.
And it grew like moss.
Yeah.
Like it just grew on me. And this was my life, you know?
Yeah, and I remember I copped in Red Hook, and this like old man, and he was like, don't do both bags at the same time. And I just remembered this the other day, and it was my first overdose. You know.
How old were you?
I had to be 18.
Wow.
And I went over to Woodhull Park on Woodhull and Hick Street. I did the bags, and that's all I remember. And the next thing I know is like I'm laying on the bench. I open my eyes, and there's like people, looking down at me. And I just jumped up, and I just start walking away. And as I'm walking away, police are coming in, and the cop comes up to me, and he's like, take your sunglasses off. Let me see your eyes. And I do that, and he's like, get the hell out of here. And
I just sent you on your way.
Yeah, I was a kid, and back then, and like they didn't really, they was like, get the hell out of here, kid.
Wow.
Yeah. So
my heart would have been palpitating.
Yeah, I mean, I was scared too. I didn't want to get in trouble, but
what were you thinking?
Well, at the moment, I was just thinking like, get out of here. And I never for a moment thought, like, I didn't really even reflect on it. I just kept it moving, and that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing to highlight. The parallel in our story, is same thing. In my mind, if I was in that position, and I'd been in that position on a gurney, in a hospital, I was just like, oh, today I did a little too much. Mm-hmm. Not that I'm almost going to fucking die. Yeah. And I'm like, no, tomorrow I guess I should have listened to the old man, one bag instead of two.
Yeah, right.
Like, it's so crazy. But that's part of the disease, similar to what your mom was telling you. Like, how could you not see? Like, oh, no, you don't understand. I don't know anything until it's right in my fucking face, and it's the ninth inning. That's when I realize,
Yeah, or when it's too late,
Right.
And my disease progressed really, really, really fast. Because at the time, back then in the 90s, especially downtown, a lot of kids were getting involved. Like, it was like before the OxyContin came out and all that. That wasn't around yet. But everybody was addicted. All my friends were addicted. Everybody. My friend Louis OD'd, and died in an abandoned building up in Harlem.
Like they found him?
They found him, yeah. A bunch of kids. Actually, I just found out today, a kid from my neighborhood overdosed and died yesterday. But, and it, progressed really fast. And before you know it, it's like I could not buy and sniff enough dope. I just didn't have the money, actually. It was a financial reason why I stopped sniffing and started to shoot up.
What happened with college? With City Tech?
Nothing. Everything just falls to the wayside. But I will say, for the next 10 plus years, I tried so hard to get myself back into school because that's what I really wanted to do. And I could never do it because I was never clean.
Right.
I was never clean. So why would I think I would be able to do that? I don't know. But that's the insanity, and I kept trying to go back and go back and go back. Right.
So how did the relationship change with your family as you started going further down the rabbit hole?
The way my house is, it's very chaotic, dysfunctional. My father is like a rager. He rages out. He totally abuses my mother, mentally, emotionally, not physically, but my father never raised his hands. But sometimes, I'd rather get punched in the face than get, mentally abused for 3 days,
Right.
So I never really had a relationship with my father. He was there, but he never took me out to do anything. Right. I never really had a conversation with him until I was an adult, and he was there, my father. It was, it wasn't like he wasn't in the household.
Right. You had a 2-parent home, but one of them was just
in his own world.
Yeah.
In his own world. And he hated his family. He didn't want to get married. He hated everything about it.
Right.
You know, and I remember as a young kid telling, like, if you don't like it, then...
Oh, he would let you know that?
Yeah, he would scream and yell and let everybody know that, everybody hear it. You know, and I would tell him, if you don't like it here, then fucking leave, you know? Like, you know, what else do you want me to say? But he would never leave, and he actually still does it to this day, to my mom.
Wow. Even though you're long gone out the house and all this other stuff.
Yeah, and I gotta be very careful with that, because if I'm not, I could get sucked right back into that household, and you know, mentally and emotionally, it's like I'm a little kid again.
Right.
You know, living in that household.
Right. Now, during this time, like that, the drugs started taking over your life a little bit at a time. You know, were you ever even thinking about trying to get clean, or like, what was it like for you?
Yeah, I used to put myself into detoxes. Lutheran back then had a detox, and I used to tell my mom, like, you know, I'm going away with my friends for a couple of days upstate or whatever, skiing or whatever. I just made something up, and I would put myself into detox. But the second I walked out that door, I went and copped.
Right.
Every time.
Wow.
Every time, you know.
How many times were you going in and out of there? For how long?
More than a dozen times. I would say in my like late teens, like 18, 19, you know, then 20, like that. By the time I was 20, but I put myself on a methadone program because it was just spiraling out of control. I remember, you know, and I woke my mother up one night, and I was like, I had track marks on my arm, and I was like, I was having a panic attack, you know, like 3 a.m.
Wow.
And I woke her up, and I was like, I got to tell you something. And I showed her, and I told her, and, you know, I was like, I have a problem. I need help. And she was like, you know, okay. She was like, okay, calm down, blah, blah, blah. Go back to bed. You know, we'll talk about it in the morning. And the morning came, and she never mentioned it again.
Yeah.
And if I bring that story up, she says it never happened. So.
Yeah, I know. It's so, you know, we you know, sometimes like, yeah, geez, she didn't have it in her to do anything else.
No. You know, look, I hated my father growing up. I couldn't stand him. I really, I couldn't. And my mother was like, she could do no wrong.
Yeah.
You know, but as I got older, I got to see, like, you know, my mother is definitely manipulative, and she's, you know, she lies, she's codependent, you know. And then my father has mental illness, and
right.
he rages out. I came to find out because he has incredible anxiety,
right?
Incredible, and him, and manifest in anger,
right? Yeah, and then, you know, with your mom, especially, this is like, you know, they come from a time where there is no therapy and that kind of stuff doesn't exist. So your mom has to learn all these survival skills, and then you have other addicts in your family.
Yeah, it was like, you know, it
must not have been easy for her.
It was like she was a single mom.
Yeah.
You know, because my father didn't help her with anything. The bills, nothing. You know, I mean, he went to work, don't get me wrong, he had his own business, he was a union carpenter. But yeah, you know, there was no teamwork there, you know, where there should, you know. And then you know, my mother and father wound up having a kid that's 10 years younger than me, my sister.
Right. Yeah. Now, did she get into drugs and that kind of stuff too, or no?
No. I think she saw too much, my sister, of me, like, just the fights in the house when I was a teenager, and, you know, I just didn't look good anymore. You know, I was bad. I was a teenage junkie.
Yeah, and you started deteriorating.
Yeah.
Like physically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now you're in your 20s. How are you making money? How are you supporting your habits? It sounds like you got a pretty good one.
Yeah, you know, some of this stuff I don't even remember, like, what I was doing at the time. But I do remember I was able to get myself back into school, right? But it was like a technical school, like TCI.
Right.
And I went and I graduated. The whole time I was getting messed up. I used to get messed up in the bathrooms at school. But the minute I graduated, I was like, I need to grow up, because now I need to go to work. And I just stopped. I just stopped doing everything. I mean, I was on a methadone program, yes, but I wasn't sticking a needle in my arm. I wasn't sniffing coke. I wasn't drinking, nothing. And I cleaned up really fast and really well. And I had a pretty good job. And
what kind of work were you doing?
I was a systems administrator.
Okay.
You know, IT stuff. And like, real quick, I thought I could go back out, you know, and hang out in the bars and, you know, chase girls or whatever. And in and out of every bar on Smith Street. And before you know it, within a year, I was back to, and now this time, what wound up happening is that even a bigger monster woke up. You know, being on a methadone program, like I can't really do heroin anymore because I don't feel it.
Right.
So what else can I do? You know, and so I started doing tons of cocaine. And, you know, I had the bright idea of shooting up the cocaine one day. And once you do that, it's a wrap, you know.
Right.
It's a wrap. And that took over my life for 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then are you working at all? Did that all fell by the wayside and you just started in the street?
That job that I said I got, I remember I didn't show up for work, and I was like, he won't care. I'll just work from home remotely. And I remember I set up the computer and everything, and I get a phone call from the boss, and he's like, where are you? I was like, I thought I would work from home today. He's like, you're fired. I didn't even care. I hung up the phone. I was like, whatever. Now I could get high. You know,
right.
I could get high without this guy bothering me or without having to do work.
Do you have your own apartment yet, or are you still living at home?
No. I was still living at home, but my friend had an apartment on Congress Street, and I was there. And I actually was working with him. We were doing construction. We were doing renovations. So that's how I was making some money. But every dime of that money went to drugs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So then what happens next?
You know, it just, again, now it's a progression with the cocaine. Now, cocaine addiction is a lot different when you're shooting it up than heroin. Like, I would go on these crazy, I shouldn't even say binges because I never really stopped. Like, it was a daily thing. I would start shooting cocaine, and then I wouldn't be able to stop unless I ran out of money or, like, my body just gave out and my mind just gave out, and I would just one after another, just, you know, track marks all over my body.
Right. Because now not just your arms, now your legs, everywhere.
Everywhere. Wherever I could hit, I was hitting because I was hitting myself so much. And, and then, like, I remember I was working with my friend, and we were renovating this old lady's house, Dolores, right? And I was robbing this lady blind. I was robbing her son because I would watch where he would put his, like, stash.
Yeah.
And then I would go take it.
Stash meaning what? Like
money.
drugs or
no,
money? Okay.
And I took like her grandson's laptop, like shit like that. She was the sweetest lady, and I was just, I didn't give a fuck. But I remember sitting down at the table in the morning with her before work, and I something just came over me, you know. And I was like, Dolores, I feel like I'm gonna die young, you know. She's like, oh, don't say that, you know, don't ever say something like that. And I was like, nah. I was like, I feel something I feel, right? So, like, I don't know, about 2 days later, now I went home, I wasn't feeling well. And to go back a little bit, like a year before that, I finally said to myself, you know, I admitted, I was like, you know what, I am a drug addict. You know, there's no denying it. So I might as well just be a drug addict instead of trying to be something else.
You surrendered to that.
I totally surrendered to it. And I just, you know, I just went off the rails. And, yeah, so I was home. Now I have my own apartment. And
how much were you paying rent?
I started out, it was like $900.
That's fucking crazy. Imagine that.
But I couldn't make the $900.
Yeah.
I got in that apartment. I rented a room. That's how I got into the apartment.
Yeah.
It's a long story with that.
But that's funny. 900, imagine. Like,
yeah.
Where was the apartment?
It's by Shore Road by Cannonball Park.
That's funny.
Yeah, and there was a roommate that paid $900 to rent the room.
Wow.
So I was really paying no rent.
Right.
You know, and I was home. I remember feeling sick. I'm not feeling well. So I went to my doctor, and I was like, something's wrong. I feel like I'm going to fucking die. You know, it's just, you just feel it coming.
Like it wasn't a mental thing. It was like something else, like on your spirit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, something like that. So, and like I couldn't hold food down. Anytime I ate something, anytime I drank something, I would throw it right back up. In the street, I was doing that. And she was like, you know, maybe you should stop getting high, you know.
Maybe.
Yeah. And I was like, okay. And now this is a doctor. She was a sweetheart. She was the methadone clinic doctor who took me into a private practice because she was like, I got to get you off this methadone.
Right.
And she's the one that first switched me from methadone to Suboxone,
Right.
which eventually would have been the best thing I ever did for me.
Right.
So the doctor sends me home, and she's with like a pump for my lungs. Just go home. I go home, and I'm home, and I'm like, I can't breathe now. I was like, I'm having a hard time breathing. And something just came over me. I had like a little clarity. It was the middle of the night. I got up. I called 911, and I was like, I need an ambulance. Like I can't. I'm having a hard time breathing. And I remember I unlocked the door, and I just like collapsed on my bed.
How old were you?
32.
Right.
31.
31.
Yeah.
Sheesh. Young men.
Yeah. So they came, and I remember they came to my apartment. They got me, and I remember I was like in this like this fog, like in and out. And I remember telling them like, oh, I'm a drug addict, and they were like, all right, where do you want to go? So we went to Lutheran. I don't know how much time went by, but I know my mom and my cousin Sharon showed up, and they were telling my parents, my mom and my cousin Sharon, because my father he wouldn't even show up for that.
Right.
They were like, he'll be fine. He has the flu or something. He has pneumonia. He'll be okay. So they leave, and the doctor, everybody just told them that I'll be fine. Like, I don't know how long after they left, and they were by my bedside, they left, and then however long after that, both my lungs collapsed,
Wow.
and I was lucky that I was in the hospital when that happened and not home. So they intubated me, and I was in a coma for 3 months, an induced coma for 3 months from that. And then they wind up finding out that I was septic. My kidneys were failing. They found that I had a pulmonary embolism, blood clot in my lung. Some other things that actually I just found out. I had another operation that I didn't know they did on me while I was in the induced coma.
Yeah, so it wasn't the flu.
No, it's definitely not the flu. So, and then they couldn't find out what was wrong with me. They didn't know what the hell was going on, but, why, like, all your organs are all failing. And then, like, one doctor, and this is, I know.
They can't tell by all the fucking pokes in your body what the hell's going on?
Yeah, well, they knew. That goes to show how little the medical field knows about, addiction and, the chemicals that we use.
Right.
They know nothing.
Yeah.
So it took this one doctor. He came in, and he was a cardiologist, and he found out because my heart went down to 5%. It was only working 5%.
Wow.
And he was the one that found out that I had what they call it a vegetation bacteria on my valve, my tricuspid valve, and endocarditis, and that you get that from shooting up whatever dirty needle, water, whatever it may be, and you get an infection. And
so the infection came from you shooting, not from like the drugs. So it's like maybe dirty needle or something like that. That's what.
No, either or, because the doctor was like, cocaine is like one of the dirtiest drugs you could shoot into your body, So
Yeah.
he was like, it could be from that. I mean, I used to throw works out in the garbage pail and go back and get them later on.
Sure.
And use them. So it could have been that too, if you think about it.
Right.
So, that was a big, and I was in the hospital for a very long time, 6 months.
What was it like? Do you remember anything from being in the coma?
Yeah, I do. This is funny because I remember living a life, which I thought, it's hard to explain this. I was really living, but I actually was dreaming it.
Right.
I was having these vivid dreams in the coma, vivid dreams. Some of them were like real life, like how it should have been, like, the wife, the kids, the house, whatever. And then other ones were like, I'm in Star Trek,
Right.
in space, and then once the police are chasing me and trying to kill me.
Right. So you're like alive in there.
Yeah.
Apparently.
It's like the Matrix, like really your brain is working. You think you are alive, but you're actually I was alive, but I was, in the coma.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fucking wild, dude. That's like super acid trip. while you're sleeping.
I know, and it's and I remember waking up from that, and they transferred me to.
What was it like just waking up from that?
They transferred me to Maimonides, and I remember waking up, and there was a whole crowd of people in my room, like all my family, and I was like, what the fuck? Where am I? Number one, how much time went by? And I remember actually one of the first questions I asked my mom. Now I can't speak because I have the tube in my throat, and I can't move from the neck down because if you're in bed for so long, your muscles start to get atrophied.
Yeah, atrophy. Yeah.
And the first thing I asked my mother in sign language was like, "Am I still on methadone?"
Yeah.
Because I was like, "Please, I hope they took me off of it. All these months I was under."
Right.
And she was like, shook her head no, and I was like, "Oh my God!" I was like, "You can't believe I'm still on this shit." So she told me that like they tried to take me off, but there was just too many things wrong with me. They were like, "We're not going to add withdrawal to it, so just keep them on it."
Right.
So that's what they did.
How much methadone were you doing at that time?
120 milligrams.
That's real.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. So then now you're paralyzed.
Yeah, and I remember waking up too, and I was like, I was not scared. I was not scared for one moment. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was happy that my previous life was over.
Right.
And now everybody knew. Like my family, it was like an open secret in my family. But now it was like in their face. They can't deny it or make believe it's not existing.
Right. Now you're not the only one.
Right.
So what happens next?
And at that point, I still wasn't out of the woods. They couldn't get the sepsis under control. They moved me to Kingsbrook Hospital. I think the hospital closed.
You had surgery too, no?
Yeah, I'm getting to that. They had to get the sepsis under control first before I had to go and have open heart surgery to correct the valve that was infected. So they sent me home for a month, right? And my mom had to go and tell everybody in like the stores not to sell me beer or cigarettes.
Right.
I had a walker. I was walking with a walker.
31 years old.
31 years old, walking with a walker. And I walked two blocks out of the way to a store I know my mom wouldn't go and bought cigarettes and beer. How sick is that?
Yeah.
Right? Eventually my mom did find out, whatever. So I stopped. And but the whole time in the hospital, I was obsessing over drugs.
Right.
So that's all I knew. I didn't know anything else. So when I go back for the surgery, the open heart surgery, the doctor was like, "Listen, we could give you two choices. Which one do you want to do? One valve lasts longer than the other, blah, blah, blah." I said, "All right, give me the one that lasts the longest." Because now I'm a young guy. I would have to get a new one put in every, I don't know how, 10 years or whatever. And he was like, he looked at me. He's like, "Nah." He's like, "I don't believe you. You're going to stay clean." And he's like, "And if you shoot up one time with this valve, you're going to die." I was like, "All right." And I'm sitting, I was like, "What'd you even ask me for?"
Right.
So I went in for the surgery, and when I came out, I was blessed that these two doctors were really good at what they do, and they were able to just scrape off the bacteria off my valve, and they didn't have to replace it. So, which is huge. My heart is intact. I don't have a metal heart valve.
Shit.
I know.
Yeah. So then where do you go from there?
And then after that, it took me a bit to learn how to walk in Kingsbrook. I had to learn how to walk. I had to learn how to talk again. So I come home, and I'm staying with my parents on Henry Street. And it was just so crazy, like chaotic. Even then, my father was completely out of his mind. And I'm like, "Dad, like, I just got home from the hospital. I just don't want, like, just stop, like, calm down."
Right.
And he's just fighting with everybody over everything, bringing up things from the past, like all kinds of stuff. And then he like threw a frying pan at me, and I was like, "I got to get out of here."
Yeah.
And I remember I went back to Bay Ridge to my apartment.
Right. Yeah. So were you thinking about recovery at that point, or how did you eventually find your way into the rooms?
Yeah, so I had a cousin who was already going to the rooms, and he just came one day and he was like, I want to bring you somewhere. I want to show you this place. And he took me to Greenwood on 20th Street and 7th in Brooklyn. And I was so nervous, and I hated everybody in the room, and I felt like a piece of shit. Like, I felt so less than everybody else, But at the same time, I knew, like, this is the place I have to be, If I'm going to beat this thing, or if I'm going to fight it or have any semblance of a normal life, I need to be around recovery, So no matter what, I still made those meetings all the time. Every day I would go to Greenwood. Right.
So you started going every day. You started putting together some time. You're still on the methadone at the moment? Did they move you to Suboxone?
No. They moved me over to Suboxone.
Well, how was the transition?
Difficult. I was her first patient that she ever transitioned, which I found out afterwards.
Nice.
So she transitioned me right in her office on next to the Bridgeview Diner, and I had my cousin Thomas with me.
Yeah.
Thank God, because she gave me the Suboxone, and I went straight into precipitated withdrawal.
Really?
Yeah, in the office. It was horrible.
What's precipitated withdrawal, so people who don't know?
So if you take Suboxone, buprenorphine too soon, what happens is that it's a partial opiate. Let me correct that. Partial antagonist. So it only fills your receptors halfway.
Right.
So if you still have any type of opiate on those receptors, millions are going to be kicked out and now only be filled halfway. That
so it
shock,
just kicks them out right away?
Right away, yeah. And it replaces them. But that shock to your system, so you have like a week's worth of withdrawal in, I would say, an hour.
Fuck.
Horrible, the worst. And it was bad, yeah.
Yeah. So then finally you get that under control. You get the Suboxone. You're making meetings.
Making meetings, and you know what? And I'll be honest, I was still like dipping and dabbing, like, I would take like a Xanax here, I would smoke weed, this and that. And then I remember like saying to myself, like, I see everybody around me like doing better, and I'm still staying stuck, at the same spot.
Right.
Why? And I figured it out because I remember I read the first step. It's like one of the first sentences, and it's like if you never get clean 100%, you will never find any happiness.
Right. Yeah, like it'll be like, okay, the only way I can describe it from what I've seen is like, all right, the bombs aren't going off, but the sun ain't out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
then you were just like, all right, fuck it. I'm just going to go clean.
Yeah. And I was like, and it was once I thought that and I put everything down really fast, I saw my life get a lot better, a lot better. And then I had like a run like of 9 years where I was on Suboxone. Yes. I didn't touch anything else. And I lived a normal life. I at first I had no way to find employment. I didn't know what I was going to do at the time.
Right.
Some guy gave me a job, cleaning rugs. I started doing that with him. And then eventually I just kind of spun off into my own thing after a couple of years. I met a girl. I would never recommend meeting a girl in AA, but I did.
Hey, you're human.
I didn't follow the directions, the advice.
Right.
And it blew up in my face, but it's okay.
Couple of times.
Yeah, a couple of times.
Oh, a couple of girls, couple of times. Yeah. That's okay too. I think it's also part of us, all of us growing up.
It is.
And like, you can't say that that's not part of the story or it's not part of the process.
Look, like you said, we're all human.
Yeah.
I'm like clean now. I never had an opportunity to chase girls and hang out and just.
No way, drugs were your girlfriend.
That's it. It was
It
from
was
when I was a
everything.
kid. Yeah, it was drugs, just strictly drugs. That's all it was about. Always.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, so you start to put yourself together.
Yeah, and then like years down the road, I remember I went to Florida, and my girl at the time was like, you know, if you want to get married and have a kid, I think you should like get off Suboxone. You know.
Yeah.
She knew nothing about it. She didn't even know what it did.
That deserves a slap in the face.
Yeah, it's so ill-informed. And at the time, like I was having a lot of GI problems with the Suboxone, and I was like, you know what, I kind of want to get off of it myself. Being a complete addict, alcoholic, you know, I don't follow the doctor's orders and direction, and I do it on my own, and it was a nightmare, an absolute nightmare.
Right, but at the same time, like, there's this big falsehood that is in some, not all, but some of the recovery rooms about people who are on a maintenance program.
Yeah.
And I think it's like the number one bullshit, like, on earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's like, you know, like I'm in charge and responsible for my own physical well-being and emotion. I don't know what it's like for somebody, forget about Suboxone. Just we'll put that or any of those things. There are people, like, there are no doctors in AA or NA or CA or whatever. So, like, we should not be giving medical opinions.
Not at all.
At all. And what happens is when people say shit like, oh, well, if your doctor prescribes, like, say, anti-anxiety, whatever, Xanax or this or that or whatever, like, oh, no, then you're not clean. And then, you know, it's not your fucking business.
Right.
Number one.
Right.
Because, listen, I could have drank yesterday. I didn't, but that's up to me. Like, so it's not your business what somebody else has to do to even just be sitting in that chair.
Right.
So I know that a little bit at a time, like, that stuff drips into your brain.
Sure.
And then you're in Florida. You got the beautiful girl. You're on the beach. She's like, you want to have kids, blah, blah, blah. And then that's the only thing your disease needs. Like, well, some of these jerk-offs in AA saying that I'm not sober because I'm on Suboxone and blah, blah, blah. So, and then I got this girl. So maybe they're right.
Right.
And then you take matters into your own hands, and what happens?
Yeah, and you know, I just want to say, like, you know, you come into the rooms, you have like no self-esteem, you feel like really shitty about yourself. So when people are telling you you're not doing the right thing, you're not sober, you know, talking behind your back, like, it messes with you. It really does. Right. And, you know, and then I was like, I want to be clean like everybody else is clean. Allegedly, right. But my therapist would tell me, like, Anthony, you're not like everybody else. You know, everybody's unique. Everybody has their own journey. You know, it's okay if you need to be on something to live normally.
Right.
Know? So yeah, it was just like the doctor left. They didn't put me with a new doctor, and instead of weaning myself down, I just stopped taking it.
Right.
And it wasn't until the second week where I started to feel sick.
Right.
So I thought I was like, oh, this is not that bad. The first week I was out, I was doing stuff. Then the second week I started to feel a little shitty. And then by the end of the second week.
Now, is it physically or mentally you're feeling shitty?
The Suboxone was more physical.
Right.
It wasn't, mentally it didn't have me that bad. When I you know, heroin withdrawal and fentanyl withdrawal, that really fucks with me. I get really severely depressed coming off of that stuff. Yeah, so I you know, and I was like trying to go to work still. I didn't tell the guy I was working with. I wound up crashing his van twice in one day. I was kicking Suboxone, and I decided to take a Klonopin to take the edge off. You know, it was the dumbest thing I ever did.
Because then it woke up the beast.
Totally woke up the beast, you know. And from that point on, you know, until fairly recently, my life has been one roller coaster up and down, you know. I'm extremely lucky that I didn't lose everything.
Right.
You know. But yeah, that started off, you know, and I was happy. All those years, I was happy. I was happy. I wasn't depressed. No anxiety. Life was good.
I think that also it's a teachable moment, and also a cementing moment for you that like that's when the disease fucking showed up, when you were climbing up the mountain and you were having all these successes.
Right.
I remember like there was this kid Alex who I love, not the one that called me today, a different one. Him I love too, but this other kid that he used to tell me, he's like, dude, the disease lets you climb the mountain, but you plant dynamite all the way up. And then as soon as you get to the top, boom, you blow up your own shit. And that's like the mental part of the disease. Like that doesn't want you to have
anything.
Right.
Be happy, have money, have friends, have a life, nothing.
The disease wants you in the corner, hiding, lying, shooting up shit, sniffing shit, stealing shit. That's what it wants. It wants you to suffer. Don't even, like people like, oh, like this disease wants you dead. No, the disease wants you to suffer.
Yeah.
Death is actually a way out.
Yeah.
But the disease wants you to get old and suffer and lose everything.
And be broken, like just
mentally and emotionally, spiritually broke, the whole shit.
Yes.
So how did you turn the corner? I mean, like you opened up the floodgates and it got pretty fucking bad.
Yeah, it got bad. Like the pandemic hit. The girl I was with and I was gonna marry for, I was with her for like 6-7 years. I had to tell her. I was hiding it from her. I was hiding the fact that I was using now. That I'm off the Suboxone, and she didn't know.
Right.
She didn't know. I was good at lying to her, telling her, oh, I took whatever, and to make me sleepy, and yeah. I mean, she. Hold on for a minute. I'm missing losing my train of thought here.
Well, like you had a couple of scrapes with her.
Yes. I'm sorry.
And then it ended up not working out.
Yeah. So what happened was I was hiding it from her, and I OD'd in the bathroom in my apartment.
Right. Now you're back to shooting dope.
Yes. So
but now this is where it's very important. Now this is not old school like you and me in 1998 heroin that I used to get in Bushwick on the dead end block in Wilson,
right,
or Lower East Side, whatever. Now it's all the fentanyl and all this other shit that wasn't there when we was out there.
Right.
Now that comes into play.
Yeah, now it's a contaminated drug supply. It's extremely dangerous.
You're really gambling now.
Yes, you really are. Every single time you get high, you really are gambling if you're going to make it or not.
And people are dropping, and this is not like in the shadows. It's on the newspaper. Fentanyl.
I read a story yesterday, and they said that 70% of cocaine overdoses has opiates in it.
Yeah.
The people have opiates in the system, meaning that they're putting fentanyl in everything.
Right.
Even the cocaine.
Yeah, it's fucking crazy.
It is.
Crazy. So you OD'd in the bathroom?
And a week went by, and it affected her a lot. I get it. But, the relationship was on a downward spiral for a little bit. And then, like, one day, she was an alcoholic, too.
Right.
And she was not drinking for a long time. Then she decided to pick up, blamed it on me because I was using. Now she had to pick up. And she just lost it in the car one day outside my house, like flipped out, screaming, yelling. And the neighbor saw and thought I was beating her up. Yeah. Called the cops. They came, arrested me. Can't go back home. Whole big thing. Took years to unravel that.
Yeah.
It's finally behind me.
But it's like that's what drugs and alcohol do. It turns your life into something positive, to everything blowing up. Now this girl's gone, and you're dusting yourself off. How do you, a little bit at a time, start to come back into like, okay, I used to have this sober life, and I want to crawl my way back into that. Like, how do you make that decision for yourself?
At first I was like, screw everybody. I hate AA because I had that thing in my head that, people were saying that I'm not clean or whatever.
Right.
But what happened is that it had to get so bad, not only physically and mentally. I mean, there was the fentanyl, and I was falling on my face left and right. I gave myself stitches above my eye. I cracked my tooth. This is all within like 3 months.
Right.
I made like, I don't know, like 6 emergency room visits.
Yeah.
You know, I slammed my face on the radiator in my girl's house, and I would go back, you know, she would come running out of the room like, what happened? And I'm like, I'm bleeding from my face. I'm like, oh, don't worry about it. I'm good. You know, so all those things started happening, and then, you know, I fell and hit my head, and I was on medication, blood thinners for I have issues with my legs, and I didn't think like, oh, I should go to the hospital. I just banged my head and slammed my head into the floor.
Right.
You know, it was like 2 weeks later, I had a headache, and lo and behold, I went to the hospital, and they're like, you have, you know, your brain was bleeding. You could have died that night.
Wow.
You know, but you know, I was home. I felt isolated. Literally felt like I was losing my mind. I just felt so disconnected. I did not like the way my life was going. You know, I was so happy, you know, those years when I was like good on the Suboxone, stable. I had a stable life, you know.
Right. Stability.
Fantastic. You know, it's the best thing ever.
It's the one thing we were running from, and now we're trying to wrestle it into submission.
That's all
right?
I wanted. Just all I wanted. I want to be stable. I want to have a nice place to live. You know, I want to have a nice business, a nice girl, and that's it. You know,
Right.
Everything else after that.
I mean, you have all of that now. So how did you get from there to here?
Well, what do you mean?
Like when you were just like, okay, my brain was bleeding. I got to go back to the rooms. I got to do something different.
Oh, well, what it was that one weekend I was home. My girl went away. I was super.
This is the new girl, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other one is gone. This is a new one. A good one.
A good one, yeah. My high school sweetheart. And yeah, I just was home. I was home. I was like jealous that she was not here, and like I was like, oh, she goes to have out with her friends, and where's my friends? Like where everybody just like disappeared.
What about me?
Yeah, what about me? You know, what about me? You can't have fun without me. And yeah, and I couldn't go see my family because of like the pandemic. My sister had a baby. I couldn't go see the baby. Like I was just like by myself.
Yeah.
And like literally, I was like, nobody's like, my phone used to ring all day for people at AA. I used to call back and forth, and now nobody's calling anymore. And I was like, I really have to get back. I got to get connected again. I got to get back in the herd.
Right.
You know?
So did you start trying to go to meetings, or did you do Zooms? What'd you do?
I don't really feel the Zooms, you know.
Yeah.
So I just jumped right back into the meetings. You know, I reached out to a couple of friends. I asked them, yo, if you're going to meetings, let me know. You know, I still pick and choose sometimes where I want to go. But a couple of, you know, now that it's a little time later, I find it a lot easier now to just get up and go to a meeting. It was hard in the beginning to go back. Very hard. It's extremely hard to like get up when you're home on a cold night, you know, move your car when you don't want to move it because you're not going to get a spot coming back, and go sit in a meeting, you know.
And that's a disease because it's like, you know, we know that this stuff is good for you. Like, it's not a cure, but we know that you'll get some relief by going to the meetings,
right.
Even being in a meeting with people you don't know.
Right.
But like, you know, we would run to the freaking projects to go buy drugs.
Right.
Right. But to the meeting, like, oh, it's cold out. I don't know.
You know, and it was like, I remember like it was like the first or second meeting I went to, I felt so relieved.
Oh.
I felt so relieved. I was like, oh, I'm back home with my people. You know, I mean, I feed off of other people's energy. When I'm by myself at home, like I tend to get negative because I grew up in a negative household. I got to talk myself out of that. And sometimes I'm not so good at doing it, you know, and that's when the depression and all that shit takes over. So yeah, I went back and I was like, this is where I need to be, you know. I mean, it's okay if I went back to my home group and I didn't know one person there.
Yeah, it's funny.
But that's all right.
It's a whole new world over there now.
Yeah,
which is good.
Yeah, it's all right. Change is good.
I was telling somebody else when we were there, I think maybe a week ago, when we were all there. I was just like, dude, there was one time that we were the new world.
Yeah.
Right? And there were these other guys that were there, TJ
right.
and these other maniacs, you know? But it's like, you know, that negativity and the depression comes, you know, when you're with yourself by yourself. And there's tools that you can use. Obviously, I'm talking to everybody because even I use them myself, bro. I go, I don't have to always read literature or whatever, even though I love that stuff. But I'll listen to speaker tapes on YouTube. I go move a muscle, change a thought. I go for, I exercise and all this other stuff. Because, like, here's the thing. There may be legitimate things that are in my life that would qualify me to be sad, upset, and depressed about. And that's okay. I'm not running from depression, but I'm running from the fact that there's nothing that I can do about it. Because, like, the disease will tell me, oh, no, you lost your sister, you blah, 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 all this other stuff, that this is why your life is zero and you are zero. And even if all of that is true, that's not the end of the line for me. And that's what recovery gives me, is that, like, okay, look, maybe the work is slow and maybe money is short and all of those things are true. I'm not running from those facts, but it's not the end.
Right.
Where, like, when the disease wants you to believe that that's going to be your life forever.
Right.
And then it's going to be really hard to get up out of the bed unless you got to make a phone call to, like, a dealer or something. You know what I'm saying? So you got to be like, okay, once I feel that little twinge inside of me, then I'm like, dude, no matter what, I have to go to a meeting. I have to do something. Like I said, even listening to meetings on YouTube and that kind of shit,
Right. We also go to meetings to, help us with our, at first you go and it's for drinking and drug use, but, you're saying now for your attitude and your behavior, because that's really what it is, comes down to. It's like my behavior is out of control.
Right.
So even when I'm not using, I drive around like an animal, or, I mean, I don't do it now, but it was like, I have to look at these things like, like how do I act? I act crazy, a lot of times without the drugs and the alcohol in my system.
Yeah, it's all connected.
It's all connected, and I have to be super careful with the mental illness thing, because I always hated my father for, being really mean and having mental illness, you know. And I was like, I don't have it. He has it. He's weak-minded. I remember I used to say that. I was really young, and I say he's weak in the head. Why can't he, like, get over this, whatever? And but now that I'm old, like, my grandfather hung himself. My father's father. My uncle killed himself. Like suicide is in my family on my father's side.
Yeah, and
mental illness and suicide.
They don't wake up like, this is how I want to be. Like, people think that mental, like, it's a choice.
Right.
Like, no. Like, your pops don't want to be the way he is. He don't know how to break out of it and whatever. But it's not like, I want to be this maniac.
Right. And now that he's old and he's 70, now he's starting to say things like, I know I was a bad father, but he would never have said that before. Now I know he's reflecting.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. My dad, like, the dementia, like, softens him up a little bit. The brain's turning to mush. They can finally let the guard down.
And I'm not the type of person to be like, you know what, and I was just like, you know what, I'm good. I'm not mad at you for anything.
Yeah, it's a nice way to end the story, man. Look, Ant, it was great having you here.
Yes,
you were awesome. Everybody, try to find us, or you can find us Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere, Pandora, the whole thing, the spiritual experience. We love you all. You're not alone. There's redemption. There's comebacks for everybody, as long as you keep, just stay connected, and you're not alone. And we'll see you around town. Peace. We want to thank you all for joining us today. And please don't forget to like and subscribe on all podcast platforms, and find us on Facebook, where you can become part of our family. We'll see you around.